Although that would usually conjure up images sunbathing on the beaches of tropical paradises, and some do fit that bill, there are quite a variety of additional experiences offered by this group of parks. Climbing to 10,000 feet elevation, diving into the realm of giant kelp plants, kayaking into sea caves, camping among wolves, and even traveling halfway around the world. Adventurer Steve Farrar will be our guide as he takes us on a visual tour of these prospective sailing destinations. And again, I am asking everyone to please stay on mute for the duration of the presentation and submit any questions you have to the chat. So thank you so much, Steve, for joining us tonight.
Great. Well, I have a couple of side announcements as well before we get started. I put the listing up for a reason. If you've really sharp-eyed, you'll notice a new entry. So we've got news on the plus side and news on the not so good side. And we'll start with the not so good, in my opinion. You'll notice the fourth entry down, line item from the upper left, says New River Gorge. As of last week, we now have 63 national parks. And you might think that ordinarily for a park aficionado, that should go as a check in the plus column. It's a little discouraging to me, and I'll tell you why. When the Park Service, national parks were our idea, they were created, and the process to create a national park takes an act of Congress to do so. That's how it was set up. It's not willy-nilly. It's not a ho-hum, throw another national park up there. It was set up for some serious debate in Congress as to the merits of the potential location, and it was to be a big deal. This is the third of the last three parks. In the last 2 years, we've had 3 national parks created. In February of 2019, Indiana Dunes was elevated from a national lakeshore to national park status. The end around that was used to do so, because for numerous years, the Indiana contingent who kept asking for this was turned down by the National Park Service. They may have phrased it a little more polite, but basically the message was, there's nothing in Indiana worthy of national park status. There was an omnibus bill that President Trump had to sign to reopen our closed government. The underhanded move by the Democrat, Republic, or doesn't matter what party affiliation, the congressman from Gary, Indiana, slid in a one-liner to just change the name. No more conserved land, no more budget allocation, nothing else changed, but Indiana Dunes became a national park. Unfortunately, this seems to be catching on, because last December of 2019, a year ago, the New Mexican contingent said, well, it worked for them, we should do the same thing. So they added a rider into the defense appropriations bill that President Trump had to sign in order to get the military their money. And the rider that was included there upgraded White Sands National Monument to our 62nd national park. White Sands was now a national park. No discussion. They couldn't even gin up local support. The locals didn't want it to be a national park, let alone on a national level. But it was in the bill, so it got signed, and we have a national park. Well, as of last week, 10 days ago, we now have our 63rd national park. New River Gorge in West Virginia had the same end-around use methodology used to create a national park. It was in the 5,500-page COVID relief bill, which no one has read. There's a rider in there upgrading the National Scenic River to national park. So we now have 63 national parks. it just flies in the face of how the process was set up to do. I'm glad we have national parks, but they don't seem to be doing it the same way. I mean, there's nothing to keep Elizabeth Warren from saying, I think Cape Cod National Seashore should be a national park. And she can put a one-liner in the next bill that's going to be signed by Congress, and we'll have a national park. They don't all deserve standing room up on the dais with Yosemite Valley and the Grand Canyon. There are other unit designations under the Park Service. They don't have to be national parks. Anyway, enough of that. Moving on, we're soon to lose President Trump, to the cheers of many and the chagrin of others. One act that he did do that I'd like to acknowledge, if you're a park lover, the Great American Outdoor Act was signed last August. For over the last 20 years, the National Park Service has been trying to desperately bring attention to the backlog, not moving forward, not creating new visitor centers or new roads or anything else, just in keeping what we've got. The attendance since 1980 has more than doubled of people going to our national parks. The budget for taking care of those parks has not increased a dime since 1980. They just can't keep up with it. And there are projects that they just don't have the money to get to. It's kind of odd because there's no real contention. There's nobody saying, no, we should let the parks deteriorate. But over the last 20 years, nobody's been able to bring it across the finish line and get anything done. President Trump passed a bill providing $9.5 billion, $1.9 billion a year for 5 consecutive years, exclusively ticketed to attacking the backlog of maintenance projects. Part 2 of the Great American Outdoor Act also generated funds fully funding in perpetuity the Land and Water Conservation Fund. He set aside $900 million every single year exclusively for local grants for government agencies to apply for, to get funds to buy parcels of land, to conserve them and stuff. $900 million a year, and hurry up and use it, because next year there's another $900 million ad infinitum every single year. And the funding for that comes straight from the fees that they charge for oil exploration permits on national lands. So it was a pretty big deal. Even a lot of the left-leaning conservation groups don't care for President Trump. Even they had to begrudgingly tip the hat to him on this one, because he was able to do something that nobody else seemed to bubble up on their priority list, and he got it done. So tip of the hat. That being said, let's go off to the tropics. U.S. national parks are on islands. You saw the list at the beginning. We'll start over in the Atlantic on Dry Tortugas, one of the Florida parks. If you head over to Route 1 and go south and go long, you'll end up down at mile 0, which is in Key West. If you don't stop there, if you keep going west another 70 miles, you'll get to the Dry Tortugas. So it's out in the Gulf of Mexico. Fort Jefferson was, Ponce de Leon named the islands the Tortugas because he caught 160 tortugas, Spanish for turtles. Caught 160 sea turtles when he went by here, when he stopped it there. Obviously, it's a nesting area. The dry portion is a mariner's term. How do you use dry with an island that's surrounded by water? It's an indication that there's no source of fresh water anywhere on the islands. So don't try to refuel here. Don't target the islands as a refueling spot. They're dry islands. 200 years ago, in the big picture, really wasn't all that long ago. 200 years ago, Spain owned Florida. The U.S. bought Florida from Biscayne, and immediately started making plans to set up a naval base to defend the Gulf. So they built this fort out on the island. The fort covers 16 acres. I think there's maybe 16 and a half acres on the island. They used the majority of the land there. Mid 1800s, they built it. If you want to, we built it for protection because the Portuguese, the Italians, the Spanish, the English, everybody had navies, and we really didn't. So to protect the port cities of Galveston and New Orleans and inside the Gulf, there are very few actual deep water channels as a means of entering the Gulf of Mexico. And you better know where they are if you're planning on sailing in there. This is a satellite view or an overhead view of the deep water channel. You can see Port Jefferson there. Even though it's 70 miles from the mainland, there's a lot of shallow water in the Gulf. And you got to know where these channels are. And from one fort, entrance to the Gulf can be protected. So there's two ways to get out there. You can there's a National Park ferry. It's an all-day trip from Key West if you want to go out there. 70 miles by ferry takes you a while. Or you can cheat. You can jump on a pontoon boat, seaplane, and scoot over there, which is what I did. The problem is, if you go by seaplane, I brought my snorkel gear. There's one of the healthiest coral reefs anywhere in the U.S. is around the Dry Tortugas. So I was planning on snorkeling for the day. When you go over by seaplane, though, you're only maybe 150 feet off the deck, and you're going over very shallow water. And what it enables is that you can look down and see the 7-8 foot sharks that are down there in the waters, and you quickly change your plan from snorkeling to maybe I'll take a tour of the fort because you can see what's in the waters there. The fort tour is pretty cool. It's a multi-tiered fort. It was supposed to be 3 levels, but bricks are heavy. And after 2 levels, the island started to sink. It was too heavy. So they stopped putting the 3rd one on. Fort fun facts. Like I say, bricks are heavy. There are over 16 million bricks. You know, if you go for your walk and you've got a brick in each hand to do your aerobic stuff, they get heavy after a while. How about 16 million of them? They were built all the way up to, some came from the coast of Maine and were ferried down there. This was mid 1800s, so there weren't a lot of huge factories churning out bricks. They came from a number of places. The architectural structure, the only architectural structure that'll support that kind of weight is an arch. The weight from above pushes down and actually is buttressed by the weight being spread out. There are over 2,000 arches just within the fort. So it's kind of cool to take a walk down a row like this. 3 levels, 50-foot tall walls. They did arm the top with heavy guns. This fort, talk about a predicament. How would you like to be in charge? It was a POW camp for the Union's internment of Confederate prisoners. There's no fresh water. There were 2,500 prisoners there, and all the jailers that had to administer to it. All they had was catch basins and rainwater to serve the needs of 25. So if there's 500 running the place, it was 3,000 people on a dry island. Here's the gang that took the ferry over and don't know what's out in the water. It is nice shallow water. It's very warm, extremely clear water. As you can see, there are some very, very shallow parts around the island. As we'll see, coral doesn't grow very in deep water. It needs shallow water. It needs sunlight to be able to grow. And this is very shallow water, so you've got some of the most pristine growing, unpolluted coral reefs anywhere in the US waters. But they're not very, you can snorkel. You don't even have to scuba dive. You can just snorkel around and get up close and personal. There are there are ships that didn't have the navigational maps of the where the channels are. So there's 300 years of shipwrecks in and around the park's waters that you can dive if you want to. Shipwrecks aren't the safest thing to go. There are a lot of sharp edges of metal, but if you know what you're doing, then some of them stick up above the water. They're just in shallow water. You can camp on the island, but it supplies nothing. You have to bring not only your own water, but you have to leave no trace camping. There are no trash buckets or refuse. You have to carry out whatever you bring in. Very clear nights though. They don't keep the lighthouse on all the time, so when it shuts off, you get quite a view of the stars up above. So that's right off of the Florida coast. Our second Atlantic Ocean park is down in the Virgin Islands. Virgin Islands owe their existence to the separation of the North American and the South American continental plates. They're pulling away from each other, and that's what created the sinkhole that is the Caribbean Basin, the Caribbean Sea. And the cracks in the mantle resulting from the separation every time it shifts allows lava to come up from down below and form another volcanic island. So all of these Caribbean islands are volcanic in nature. St. John's is one of the 3 Virgin Islands where the national park is. In the 1700s, Denmark, who also had a good navy, sailed over and they claimed St. John. It used to be completely covered with old growth rainforest, but the temperature was such that they wanted to grow things, so they completely eradicated the rainforest to make way for their plantations. So they had sugar plantations there. Early 1900s, Germany was making waves. They were invading their nearby countries, and we were afraid that since Denmark had the islands down here, that if Denmark got taken over by Germany, they might set up a sea base of operations right off our southern border. So we quickly negotiated and bought the Virgin Islands, bought a bunch of them. The main 3 are St. Thomas, St. John, and St. Croix. There's a bunch of little islands in there as well. We paid $25 million, which I guess in the early 1900s was a lot of money. Today, there are standalone single homes on these islands that are worth more than $25 million. So in the big picture, we got a steal. We made a good deal. Initially, the territory was administered to by the Navy, was turned over to the Park Service. Once again, we owe our thanks to the Rockefellers. Lawrence Rockefeller bought most of St. John's. It was his personal little escape areas, tropical delight. And he really loved it. He wanted to protect it from being developed at any time in the future. So he had 5,000 acres that he tossed over to the Park Service and said, "Here, take care of this. Make sure it's not developed." The island itself is only 12,000 acres. The park takes up almost 10,000 of the 12, and over half of that was given to the park by Rockefeller. So thank you very much. Very easy to access from St. Thomas is the usual port of call for cruise ships that stop in the Virgin Islands. It's the most populous of the Virgin Islands. You can take from Red Hook, the far eastern town drinking bar place on St. Thomas, you can take a 20-minute ferry. You can almost hit a driver from from the end of St. Thomas over to St. John's. $50, they'll bring your car over for you. The Rangers, this is one of the more desired spots. Some rangers get stuck out in the hinterlands for year after year. You have to put in well in advance if you want to shift locations and become a ranger in a different park in the system. The Virgin Islands is one of the more desirable assignments. This is what you get to patrol in your little boat. This is the North Shore, and it's sculpted as a series of bays. They're all virtually identical. We'll start at the western side. North Shore, western end of the island is Hawks Nest Bay Beach. They all are protected by coral reefs. You can see the coral running out from the beach here. The next bay over is Trunk Bay. And this one has a fringing reef. A fringing reef runs parallel to the beach offshore, and it sets up a shallow protected area like a lagoon in behind it. So you can see the light blue aquamarine waters, very calm waters because of the fringing reef that's outside of it that stops all the waves and sea action. So this area is patrolled. There's a a lifeguard, tough duty. He gets to paddle around. The swimmers there are all snorkeling. They're following the trail. They're doing their hiking. The trail here is underwater. It's pretty cool. It's not very shallow. It is shallow. It's not very deep. So you don't need to scuba dive. You can just follow all the signs and the arrows. And as you snorkel around, they have descriptive plaques under there that point out the different types of coral and the different species of fish and stuff. So they tie a parrotfish to the parrotfish sign so that you can see what they look like. No, they don't tie. That's just where they live. So it's very educational. The corals, as I mentioned, they need sunlight for photosynthesis to be able to build, to live. They are living creatures. They also need clear water. Anything like from a delta or at the mouth of a river or something that's spewing muddy water, that would cloud the water and block the sunlight, and no corals could live there. So it needs sunlight and clear water. It also needs warm water. They like right around 70 to 80 degrees is their sweet spot. There are no corals that grow in fresh water. They need salt water. All of these conditions have to be met, and they need clean, different from clear. Clean meaning there can't be any agricultural runoff like used on golf courses, for example, that might run down into the water system and flush out into the waters. That would grow algae, and that would cover the corals. So they need clean, clear, warm, salt, and sunny waters. And if you have all 5 of those conditions, you get corals. So here's one of the signs. This is an elkhorn, and it's right at the base of the elkhorn and the stag corals. There are urchins there. There are all kinds of things. So it's a great way to spend an afternoon, but you have to keep in mind that you're exposed to the sun. You're nice and comfortable in the water, but I happen to be a redhead and didn't have a shirt on. So you pay the penalty with sunburn afterwards if you don't take proper precautions. Beautiful, beautiful coral formations down there. And creatures, lots of, in addition to fish. Cinnamon Bay is the next one over from Trunk Bay. Cinnamon Bay is where the camping area is, where you can rent camp spots in the park. And then, so as you keep driving out from the ferry landing, more and more people drop off to stay at the beaches. If you keep going east, by the time you get to Maho Bay, you can see how there's not a lot of people there. You pretty much have the place to yourself if you want to keep traveling. Beautiful place to hang out though. One single mammal indigenous to the islands are the bats. They're not bad things. They're very good actually. They're the pollinators that make for a lot of the tropical flowers. They eat the fruit and they disperse the seeds for the fruit. So both flowers and fruit get pollinated by the bats. And they also, every adult bat will consume their own weight each night in mosquitoes. So you want bats around. They're a good thing. What you don't want around are the non-indigenous mammals. I'll get to donkeys in a minute. But there are feral donkeys roaming the islands actually. Cinnamon Bay, this is the camp. This is where you go into the office and get your campsite. It's right on the rim of the beach. You can rent pup tent spots and bring your own tent. You're all of 10 yards from the beach. But the drawback to that is that it takes rain to create a rainforest. The tropical downpours that you'll see here are like clockwork. They'll come every afternoon. You can bank on it. So if you don't want to come back and find a very soggy tent and contents, your sleeping bag floating in a pool, you can rent one of these tent cabins that are elevated. They're on a platform very specifically to keep them out of the rain runoff. And that does the trick. They're not very complex, but it keeps you dry. Problem is the donkeys. The donkeys escaped and they're like feral cats. They're feral donkeys. Well, they're not stupid. They're pretty smart actually, and they know what's in those coolers. And they'll come raid your campsite. They come in the middle of the night and they'll tip things over to get at the food in the coolers. So the rangers used to eradicate them. They would either capture them or kill them, and they'd load them on rafts and stuff and take them out in the channel and feed them to the sharks. Well, it wasn't too long ago, they kind of got caught, or they got lazy. They didn't go out at night and dump the donkeys. They were doing it in the morning, and it was cruise ships nearby were absolutely aghast at the fact that they were dumping dead carcasses into the water, and they complained to the Park Service. So now there's no more eradication program. Well, that's good for the donkeys, but the population is getting out of control, and they're everywhere. They gang up. There are roving bands of feral donkeys on the island. Something that you don't normally hear about, but it's odd. So you can get away from that by renting a cottage. They do have cement rentals there that are a pretty good deal. They sleep 4, 5, 6 people in a cottage. So it's not resort living, but it's not stuck out in a pup tent either. So there are quite a few options. So as you can see on the North Shore, you've got Hawks, Trunk, Cinnamon, Maho Bay. If you follow the road along and come down out of the mountains to the South Shore, Salt Pond Bay, if any of you are collecting the National Park Quarters series, the Virgin Island Quarter has a Salt Pond Bay is what's depicted on the Virgin Islands Quarter. Very similar to the North Shores, except that it's much more protected. Most of the storms and winds come from the north. The South Shore is pretty glassy. It's very simple. To shallow water, a lot of seagrass, so you can find critters there. This is an octopus. Manta rays like the grass. Eagle rays, sorry. There are turtles. I had a ball with this turtle that he just stuck around. I had to keep going up for air, but then I'd come down and he wouldn't let me touch him. But I played around with him. He was patient. I'd go up, get a mouth of air, and come back down, and he'd wait for me, and then he'd go along. Not a lot of places you can get up close and personal with the critters. The park has been extended. The green border that you see is the national park, which does contain some of the protected waters, but I think it was 2001, the blue borders, the national monument was glommed on outside the park it added another 12,000 acres. So the size of the island itself has been added to it in additional protected submerged habitat. There are only 45 species of coral anywhere in the world. 30 of the 45 are found in the new protected areas. Now the remnants of the old sugar plantations, if you go back up on the hill on the ridge, you can go visit the Annesburg. They used to make sugar, molasses, and then rum, depending on how further the sugar cane got produced. Anna's hill is Anneberg. Berg is Danish for hill. So you can stay up there and get a view like this for sunset if you're up on top of the ridge, which is worth staying up for. But even if you go back down to sea level, the view's not too shabby either. It's paradise. It's a tropical paradise. If you get the chance, go there. It's very, very memorable. And now for something completely different, we have a freshwater island. Isle Royale, that's my son Jake. The two of us hiked for about 5 days out in the park. There are no roads, there are no, I think there's a lodge up in Rock Harbor, but we were down in Wendigo on the other end. It's a good size island. It's 45 miles. It's off the upper peninsula of Michigan. It's actually closest to the Canadian border. There's quite a few smaller islands, 400 of them, off the shores and stuff, but the main island is pretty good size, 9 miles wide by 45 long. It's a 22-mile ferry ride from Grand Portage, which is the town just below the Canadian border. So if you're in Minnesota, driving up along the western shore of Lake Superior, which is a beautiful drive, by the way, just before you get to Canada, there's a town of Grand Portage. That's where your ferry goes, and it takes you 3 hours by ferry to get over there. This is the only national park to entirely shut down in the winter because there are not a lot of people that go there in the summer, let alone in the winter. It is the single least visited park in the lower 48 states. Although it's getting up there. A couple of years ago, they set a record with 25,000 visitors. You get more than that in the morning at Great Smoky Mountains. So same options. You have the ferry from Grand Portage that you can take over there, or you can fly by seaplane. Very similar latitude to New England, so you get the same rocky coasts. They have trees turn in the autumn the same as our foliage and stuff. Very similar maple trees, birch trees. Moose came over. I don't think they swam to get there. I think there used to be some lodges before it was named a park. There were some hunting lodges there. I think they imported the moose to have something to shoot. But around 1908, the moose started, and they loved the place. It was nirvana for them because there were no predators. So they started getting, their population got a little out of control, actually. They were overpopulating the place. Now, talk about an alpha male. In the winter of 1947, it was so bitter cold that the 22-mile stretch between the Canadian shore and the island froze solid. Lake Superior froze. whatever prompted the leader of the wolf pack to say, hey, let's go along and head out across very barren, very stark, frozen ice and pad out there 22 miles. He knew something. I don't know how they figured it out. But when they got there, oh, look, moose. There was a food source. So ever since then, you've had a wolf population and you've had a moose population. And the two of them go up and down depending on whose turn it is. If the wolf eat too many moose, then there's not enough food and the wolf pack dies down. And vice versa if they eat too many. The average has been about 25 wolves roaming on the island to 1,000 head of moose. It's the only place actually where there's no bears involved. The bears haven't decided to either walk across the ice or to swim over. So there's no presence of bears. You just have wolves and mooses. Meese? We had a problem. 2 years ago, the wolf count was down to only one pair. And the moose count was up almost to 1,500. So the park, this is after many, many years of inbreeding because it was the same pack of wolves. It's not good for the gene pool. The DNA kind of runs thin. So the NPS put forth a plan actually in January of a year ago this month, actually. They brought 13 new wolves to the island from the outward bound program area up in the upper lakes region of Minnesota and over the line into Ontario. They captured some wolves, brought them, and now the wolf population has a fresh breed, fresh blood. So hopefully they'll be coming back. This is what a hike looks like. They help keep your feet out of the mud. It gets a bit soggy there at going through the marshlands. So there's an elevated boardwalk in some places. Other places, they haven't done much trail maintenance and it's kind of hard to make out where the path is. One funny thing about this, my son, Jake, who was there with me for the week, is about 6'2". His stride is very, very much longer than mine. So we would start off together in the morning, but within the first half hour or so, he was well out of sight. And solitude's good. We got to hike, and plus by the time I got there to where we were going to camp for the night, he'd have the tent all set up and supper was on the fire and stuff. So it worked out all right. But it left me alone for a lot of the day. Thimbleberries. When you go to the visitors center on the park, not any of the parks, but this one in particular, they have a chart on the wall. These are called thimbleberries because that's how big they are. They fit right over your thumb, just like a thimble does. I ended up using up my water, my drinking water, early on in the morning. We were there in August and it was pretty hot. And you start hiking through these bushes. Now you don't even have to leave the trail. You're surrounded by these succulent looking. They're related to raspberries, and they look like big, fat, juicy raspberries. But on the wall in the visitors center, there was a poster that I studied. It had the thou shalt and the thou shalt nots, listing of the poisonous plants on the island and the ones that are okay, that the edible ones. Well, do you think I could remember what side the thimbleberry fell on? I hiked for hours surrounded by them, afraid to eat them. And then finally my thirst got the better of me and I said, oh, the heck with it. And I gobbled them down. They're a little tart, but very, very juicy. And it turned out they were on the edible side of things. So there were no nasty side effects from it. But you want to pay attention. If you're going to go out into the wilderness, watch the movie at the visitor center where they describe that kind of stuff and pay attention to the charts. The moose there are no firearms allowed in any national park. So the critters aren't used to catching one between the eyes. So they're they're not really afraid of people. They're used to seeing people hike around in the woods, so they just kind of come by. Or when you set up camp, they'll want to see what's for supper. They'll come over. These things are big. That's a 4-man tent. The dome tent is pretty tall. His back is higher than the tent, so you don't want to make them mad. But again, there's your path through the forest. They do have some shipwrecks, more shipwrecks. There's some buoys that designate, I think there's about 9 shipwrecks that are diveable. If you're in Minnesota and you're a scuba diver, you don't have a lot of options, so you go find shipwrecks. You can kayak around there. You don't need a backcountry permit or anything. You can pretty much camp wherever you feel like it. There are some designated camp spots about a day's hike apart if you're making a circuit. But if you find a shore to pull up on with your kayaks, you can have that cove to yourself. Sunsets are gorgeous. But you're also up high enough, you're up almost in Canada, so you can catch some of the northern lights. They're not quite as much of the sky is dancing as you'll get if you spend some time up in Alaska, but northern lights are northern lights. Catch them where you can. All right, so Atlantic coast, Middle America. Now we're off of the Los Angeles coast to see the Channel Islands. Channel Islands upgraded from a national monument in 1980 to a national park. There's 5 of the islands. There are more islands out there. 5 of them are within the confines that make up the national park, the Channel Islands. The only way I went out there, it was back in the 80s, and I grabbed a ride on a Coast Guard boat that brought me out to Anacapa. Now it's much more organized. You can only go by an official concessionaire. You gotta pay your money to get out there. The floating dock is pretty cool. It's doesn't matter what the tide is. The dock goes up and down with the tide. So you disembark from the shuttle, the ferry boat, to get out there, and you can sit up. I sat up on the top of this bay looking on the Rocky Mount, the ridge, looking down at the bay, and saw just hundreds and hundreds of seals. They must have just had their pups, because it was an incoming tide and they were riding the waves in like surfers, and they were having a ball. It was pretty fun to sit and watch them. Every one of the parks has its particular symbol. The symbol of Channel Islands National Park is the sea arch, the Anacapa Sea Arch, which you can kayak out to. Some of the concessionaires will bring your kayaks out for you, and then you can go around if you want. They also have diving options. So if you want to go down and see the real wonderland, this is the marine equivalent of Redwood State Park. Kelp beds are incredible. Kelp plants will grow to over 100 feet tall. And there's different environments depending on what section of the kelp plant you're visiting. Down on the seabed, there's one set of habitats. In the middle, you get a different, and then up at the top is different. As the tide sways, the plants actually may be taller than the water is deep. So they don't spout up above the surface. They just kind of sway back and forth horizontally to the tides. So you can dive around there, see all kinds of critters, and be seen by all kinds of critters. The curious seals will come see who's invading their territory. Now when you're diving, most masks will cut down on your peripheral vision, so you've kind of got tunnel vision to begin with. In addition to that, everything underwater is magnified, so it looks bigger than it is. How would you like to turn your head suddenly and see this guy beside you? If we catch an 8-pound trout, it's worthy of calling the taxidermy guy and putting it up over your mantle. How about 800 pounds? They're not dangerous. They don't even have teeth. But one of these babies would provide quite a few meals of sea bass. They frequent the waters, so if you're going to dive, you shouldn't be too surprised to see one like that. Urchins are a problem to the kelp beds because what they like to do is they eat what passes for a root system. It's called a holdfast. What anchors the kelp beds to the seabed is called a holdfast. And the urchins come along and they'll attack it and eat it through, and then off with the tide goes the whole kelp plant. So they're kind of a pain. If you go up top to the surface, the fronds of the upper parts of the kelp plant have air bubbles, bladders, to keep the plant floating, to keep it vertical. Well, that suits the otters fine because they'll just hang out there and they wrap themselves up in the bubbles, in the bladder flotation devices, and they can take a nap or they can go eat their lunch or something off of their chest and not worry about treading water because it's the seaweed keeps them up, the kelp plants. So it's very, very different depending on what part of the plant you're visiting as to what you're going to see. This is odd. They didn't break away from the mainland. They've never been connected. The islands are out there, which means anything on the islands has developed in and of themselves. There are 150 different species of both plants and animals that are not found anywhere else in the world, just on the Channel Islands. It's kind of strange. They recently dug up this Pygmy Mammoth. It's the most complete fossilized skeleton of a Pygmy Mammoth ever found. They used to frequent the islands, I guess. And then they have these little guys, the island fox. It's the smallest canine anywhere in the world. It's 12 inches tall when fully grown. Like a ruler is as tall as they get. They're on 6 of the 8 Channel Islands, but nowhere else in the world are they found. They do have sea caves, and these you can get commercial trips to go visit. There's over 100 of them, mostly on the North Shore, and they're huge. The wave action pounds away and erodes the rock, and it keeps carving away. This is one of the largest anywhere in the world. There are over 70 of them that are 200 feet or more deep that you can sail right into, either kayaking or taking boats in there and stuff. You want to make sure that you're not going to get flushed, and hard hats are good because if the water rises or the waves come in and bounce your head off the top, you want your helmet on. So you can kayak around, you can snorkel around. There's California sea lions there checking you out. The seals will come by. They're very curious. So if you're snorkeling, they'll come by and not really play with you, but just check out what you're doing. There are some of the islands that are off limits. This is virtually our version of the Galapagos. It's San Miguel has a rookery where there's a lot of activity, but obviously you can't go walking around where the babies are. They also have seals there. The northern elephant seal, about 5,000 pounds of seal. They're 15 feet long, so it's about the size of a caravan, and they weigh the same. They weigh 5,000 pounds. They can dive 5,000 feet down. Divers have been down that deep and found them swimming around. They can hold their breath for over an hour and a half, 90 minutes. They can stay underwater. So it's pretty Doesn't look like much. It looks like a snail without its shell, actually, but they're pretty amazing. So that's the Channel Islands. You can hang out there. This is that ridge I was talking about. You can hike along. And now we'll get out to the nice warm parks, the Hawaiian Islands. Haleakala is on the island of Maui. It takes the southeast corner of the island. Haleakala itself is the volcano in the middle, and then the park preserves downstream, that where the rivers and water flows down from the summit. That's the confines of the park. So sunrise is I would say, the biggest attraction here. You can go up to the summit. You can drive right up to the summit, to the 10,000 foot level. This is sunrise from the top of Haleakala. And when you're up there, the crater itself is absolutely unworldly. The astronauts going to the moon, actually, this is where they went to train, because it's a very similar environment. It's just completely bleak. But there's a path that goes through it if you want to hike. It's the only place on Earth you'll find the silver sword. These plants are awesome. They live a long time. They're actually sunflowers, members of the sunflower family. The plant lives for up to 50 years. It blooms once. It sends this 6-foot stalk up with about 600 seeds one time, and then it promptly keels over and dies. Nowhere else on Earth, only found within the crater of Haleakala. This is why they used it for the lunar training. That's what it looks like. It's also very high and very clear, dry air. So the observatories up on top there that are accessible, you can drive up to. They're at 10,000 feet. The name Haleakala means house of the sun in Hawaiian. These are people that have been driven up to catch sunrise. It's very cold. We were there, well, it was July or January. We were there on New Year's Eve, actually. We got picked up at 2:30 in the morning on New Year's Eve, and we're up there at 10,000 feet at 6 in the morning. Very cold. There's my 3 boys, actually, our 3 boys. In their one pieces, because after sunrise, we hopped on our bikes and rode our bikes from 10,000 feet down to have breakfast at sea level on the beach. You don't have to pedal an awful lot, but you hope your brakes hold, because that's the that's the route that you're riding your bikes down. It's pretty fun. They have they bring the bikes up for you in the van, and then he rides behind you so you don't get run over by cars coming down. But partway down, it warms up, and you're not up in the clouds anymore. So you shed the one piece, and this is your view for the lower part of the ride down. If you then want to continue, you end up on the north shore of Maui. When you come down from the summit, you can bend around the east coast. This is the road to Hana. If you've ever driven it, it's rather an unforgettable experience. It's one of the most scenic drives anywhere in the United States. That's the road. Look at the cars down at the bottom for a little scale. It's not one where you want the driver viewing, because there's not a lot. Some of the bridges have guardrails, but most of the hairpin turns do not. So you want to pay attention. They literally just hacked into the side of the mountain. It's not where a road belongs, but it's pretty wild way to get down there. You get down to the town of Hana, and if you follow it past there, you get down to where the blue dot is. That's the 7 pools. That's the Kipahulu section of the. There's a visitor center and a park entrance there at the Kipahulu Visitor Center. You can park there and walk up the rivers that are flowing down from the volcano. And there's this series of pools, the 7 pools, that you can keep climbing up and climbing up. And each one of them, there are my 3 boys. Brooks is in flight there, having just leaped off the lava where the Jake and Galen are standing watching him, because you have to clear about 15 feet out to not land on lava rock to make it to the pool. And they were having second thoughts about it. But you can spend a fun day in the waterfalls and jumping in the pools, and it's fun. So now if you're back up at the top and you pivot 180 degrees, you're not facing east. This is sunset from the summit. Also, well worth your time to go up there. Takes clouds to make a great sunset or sunrise, and the clouds come all the way across the Pacific, so they gather here, and unforgettable. And then at night, those aren't clouds, that's the Milky Way, and that's how vivid your view is from up there. The other Hawaiian park is down on the Big Island. This is Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. It's on the southern edge of the Big Island. Contains 2 of the most active volcanoes in the world. If you've ever been over to Iceland, you'd think that's saying something, because there are a lot of other places in the world where there's eruptions going on. But this is unique. Mauna Loa, for a volcanic island, 13,000 feet is pretty tall. So that's an oddity in itself. But it happens to be the tallest mountain anywhere on Earth, because the 13,000 is measured from sea level. The mountain doesn't stop there. If you follow the shape of the mountain down to its base on the seabed, it's actually 56,000 feet tall, as opposed to Mount Everest, which is 29,000 feet. So Mauna Loa is a big one. It's big above the water, but it's even bigger down below. The rim overlook, there's a road that goes around it. This is the crater of Kilauea, which is bubbling. There are accommodations there. There's a restaurant here, the Volcano Lodge, Volcano House. You can have meals and even stay there if you want to stay in the park. Crater Rim Drive flows south from there. One of the stopping points is this Thurston lava tube. During an eruption, the lava flows and empties, but the outsides of it, the leading edge, if you will, of the hotspot cools down and reforms as rock. While the magma inside flows out, it leaves the tunnel of lava. There are not a lot of places where you can go crawl around inside a lava tube, but this is one of them. So if you drive from Crater Rim, the circle up at the top, all the way down the Chain of Craters Road, you get down to the sea. When I say down, it descends 3,700 feet from up on the volcano all the way down to sea level. So it is a steep descent. But that gets you down to where the action is, because this is where the lava is flowing. This section that we're walking across was liquid a few days earlier. It's just recently skimmed over, and it crinkles as you walk on it because it's not been stepped on before. So the boys had fun climbing around. This is Pahoehoe is the viscous. It's like molasses. It's not a flowing, free-flowing lava. It's kind of globular, and it just kind of glops around. This was just formed within the last day or so. These guys weren't real happy. They were rangers that were yelling at us because we had gone out. It's a national park. You can go anywhere, but they do have their guidelines. They have the ropes there, and we were well outside of them. We were over where the live lava was flowing, which they had a point. I mean, we were being kind of ignorant. We got to the point where our sneakers were actually melting, which was a little too close for comfort. You shouldn't be pressing it quite that much. It's a lot easier to come back at night. We were there in the afternoon. Brooks and I went back at night and went and sat on the ridge here where the lava was flowing over into the ocean. It's kind of hard during the day. You can't see it as much, but if you come back at night, the lava glows and it's a lot easier to pick out and see what's there. It's been constantly flowing. This is 12 years since the violent eruption went off. Now it's just burbling or flowing constantly. And it's the biggest attraction on the big island. People come to see it at night. And the two of us sat, you got to be able to kind of hold your nose because there's a lot of sulfur being released, a lot of sulfur gas. But we sat for hours just watching basically the island growing. The lava flows, it hits the water, it steams, and you're watching the growth, the extension of the shelf growing the island. There are not a lot of places where you can safely get up close and personal to flowing lava, but this is pretty unique in that respect. And it gives you some awesome photo ops. It was actually pouring rain when we were running down there. It stopped, it cleared up, and we had quite a light show. And here's the last of our parks, National Samoa. This was 10 months ago in March, right when COVID was starting to shut things down. I had taken off from Honolulu and flown down there. The Samoan Islands, this is in between Fiji and Tahiti. There's a US national park in the South Pacific. It's about equidistant from Los Angeles to Honolulu as it is from Honolulu down to, it's spelled Pago Pago. They actually pronounce it as though there's an N in there. It's pronounced Pungo Pungo. That's the capital of American Samoa. Awesome harbor. We took it on during World War II to shelter our fleet. The harbor itself is actually a flooded caldera. Samoa means sacred earth, very primitive. It's the only national park that we don't own. It's on land not owned by the United States. In 1993, we negotiated a 50-year lease from the island. So we have a section of the rainforest, a section of beach, and some coral reefs on each of 3 different islands. So there's the view of the Pungo Pungo Harbor from up above. That's Mount Oliva is the climb. They're formed very similar to the Hawaiian Islands. There's a hot spot in the crust and the volcano. The islands are the tops of shield volcanoes that go 3 miles deep. And as I mentioned, the harbor itself there is basically just a flooded caldera. So there's the harbor. You can see Mount Oliva at 1,600 feet is the highest point on the island. So that's the hike that I did. Right along the red line, which is basically a ridge that just keeps climbing and climbing and climbing up to the summit. I was actually quarantined there. When I arrived in March, there had not been any COVID cases yet on the island, and they wanted to keep it that way. I didn't have any symptoms or anything, but because my travel had begun in Boston at a location where there had been reported cases, I was supposed to stay in my resort. I can think of worse places to have to be quarantined than a South Pacific island, but that isn't why I came there. I came to hike. So I didn't get on the bus with others. I took a private taxi to get to the trailhead. I didn't go to the market to go to the souvenir shops or anything. I stayed to myself, but I was going to go climb the mountain. So to avoid crowds, I hiked. This is by the equator, so it really doesn't matter what time of year it is. It's hot and it's very, very humid. I hiked at noon because nobody else is stupid enough to hike at noon to climb a mountain in the heat of the day. I didn't run into anybody, but I went through 7 t-shirts. Pretty hot stuff. I didn't have anybody with me, so these are all selfies. If I was going to be in the picture, I had to take the picture. There's hibiscus, all beautiful floral flowers all over the place. And what I was hoping to do, because I had read about them, was to catch sight of a flying fox. Right dead center is a fruit bat hanging from his feet. They're not nocturnal, and they're very big. They're 3.5 pounds. They have the largest wingspan of any bat. They're 5-foot wingspan. It's like a hang glider. And as you're hiking along the ridge line there, that's the ridge that I came up from the upper left. I came along the ridge to this point. In the national park, nobody can go up and pick the fruit or anything. So all the trees along that ridge line are full of ripe fruits. Well, I'd be hiking along and there's nothing above me. You're at the top of the ridge, but all of a sudden the sun would be blotted out and a big shadow would come over, and I look up and there's these flying foxes. These fruit bats are all over the place. It wasn't, oh, I hope I can catch a glimpse of one. They were like dive bombing. They were all over the place all day long because the trees are full of fruit and that's what they eat. So they were everywhere. They were all over the place. You get up to the top and there's this gazebo up there. You can sit there and you've got a very well-earned view of the harbor. That's right dead center is the resort where I was staying, that I was supposed to be at, which had a coral reef right outside it. You could snorkel. You didn't really have to go anywhere, but that's a picture I took from the top of Mount Oliva of Pago Pago Harbor. Now, if you climb from the north side, there's not a nice as steep as the ridge was to climb. This one goes straight up. It's like a CrossFitter's delight. The only way to get up is it's too steep for a trail. The dirt doesn't hold on the sides of it. So they have these ladders. It's the only way of getting up from the sea level up to the ridge is through this constant climbing of these ladders and ladders and ladders. It's pretty rough. There's not a lot of Motel 6s on the island. So they do have a homestay program. If you give notice ahead, some of the villagers, there's 9 different villages within the confines of the park, and it's their lands. You can petition to ask to stay with one of the families, and they'll take you in, and you can go fish for your supper. They'll teach you how to throw the nets and stuff to catch fish, and it's a different kind of experience. But this is absolutely a tropical paradise there. Some of the parks were concerned about smog and air pollution. Not here. This park, the air is so clean in American Samoa that the National Oceanic Atmospheric, NOAA, uses the air here as their baseline for air purity anywhere else on the planet. There's no cleaner air than right here. And it's obviously it's a rainforest. There's waterfalls. It's a pretty fun place. It's the rim of a caldera, so these cliffs are the edges of the volcanic cone, and they rise straight up out of the water. They're some of the steepest shore cliffs anywhere in the world. And the section over on the island of Afu that the park administers to has twice as many species of tropical fish as are found in the waters of Hawaii. So as populous and as fun to snorkel and scuba dive around Hawaii as it is, this has double the number of fish species. There's their tourist bureau Bali High picture. Come visit. So that's our visit, our tour of the island parks. Just a heads up, next February 11th, the coming February 11th, we're going to lower left-hand corner, the Western parks. We're going to take a tour of the Sierra Nevadas. We'll start in Nevada and then go right down Southern California from Yosemite south. So if you have any questions and have hung in there and are still with me, I'll be glad to.
No, it sounds great. We've still got about 40 people with us. So that's great. So one of the questions that came out right away at the beginning, because they said they had remembered it from the last time, from your last presentation, was you are obviously well-traveled and experienced with adventure hiking. Have you ever found yourself in unexpected need of any just-in-case emergency supplies that you learned to pack? And did you ever have to learn the hard way?
That would take a whole presentation to go through some hair-raising stories, but you get yourself into, it depends on how far you want to push the envelope. I do a lot of solo trips and the cavalry's not coming. So you got to keep that in mind when you're maybe going down something that if it dead ends, you got to be able to get back up. There were a couple that I really wished I had brought a rope with me that I now pack that I didn't initially. No, I haven't. I despite what it sounds like it sometimes, I actually do use pretty good caution. And as you age, you get wiser. So I haven't had to call for rescues or anything like that. There have been a few where it's just, pardon my French, shit luck that I'm still here, because there were climbing up some rock ledges where I've put my hand up within 6 inches of the head of a rattlesnake that was sunning himself on that ledge. That maybe I shouldn't have been there. He chose to send the rattle signal and scare me away rather than take a shot at my hand. Things like that happen. There's been some bear encounters that my little spray can seemed woefully anemic to if he should charge, but
wow,
I've lucked out.
Yeah, I remember the rattlesnake thing reminded me of when we were hiking around Lake George in the Adirondack State Park. It's a state park, not a national park, but
yep.
Apparently there are rattlesnakes around there too. And
Sure.
I kept thinking every time I was going up like a scramble of rocks on Tongue Mountain that I would get bitten by one of them, but I never saw a single one.
Well, hindsight being 2020, if you think about it, the nice level spot that you're reaching up onto is where they sun themselves. So
yeah,
you have to take that into consideration.
Sure, wear thick gloves or something. Okay. And then the one question that I wanted to get out of the way was based on what you had said before you started the presentation on the island parks. And I wanted to ask you if you could sort of talk about like, what is the most common reason that a park is elevated to the national park status? Because I know you talked about the New Gorge being
in the
kind of a
olden days or now?
surprising. Yeah, like I mean,
now I'm afraid the answer is greed. Indiana Dunes, for example, was doing just fine as a national lakeshore. The congressman from Gary, Indiana, I don't know if you've ever been to, I hope nobody's here is from Gary. I was not terribly impressed. Think Harlem. A lot of rundown old steel factories that are closed up, boarded up businesses, adult video stores. It's just a horrible area.
Mm-hmm.
The congressman from there has been promising since the mid 80s, he's been promising his constituents that he's going to bring in tourist dollars.
Okay.
no one in their right mind would visit as a tourist destination.
Mhm.
But national parks bring in money. So that
Yeah.
was why what provided his impetus for upgrading it to a national park, to seeing that it got done, because now park nuts like me will go there and visit. Whereas
Mhm.
as a lakeshore, maybe I'd not choose to go there. They did the same thing in White Sands. White Sands National Monument was the most visited out of 14 National Park Service locations in New Mexico. White Sands National Monument was already the #1 most visited place. The
Mhm.
locals said, "No, we don't want a national park. We're fine. It's already hordes of people here. We don't need more." But they went ahead and upgraded it. It brings in a lot of money. So unfortunately, that's now the driving factor.
Yeah, yeah. I just wonder if like if that's not such a bad thing, but yeah, I guess you're right. It's not great for the environment maybe.
Hopefully an area would stand on its own merit, that it's
Yeah.
being worthy, judged as worthy of a national park status.
But
And there's a
do
lot
but
of other Park Service designations. There's national memorials, there's national monuments, national recreation areas, national historical parks. There's all kinds of things, and all of them are preserved and conserved by the Park Service.
Mhm.
It's the crown jewels that are reserved for national park status. It's not supposed to
Yeah.
be pedestrian.
I guess it was more that was sort of answering my next question, my follow-up question, which was like, do the national parks get an extra special conservation status
There are
that,
different rules. Yes, that's the highest level of protection.
yeah.
Um, for example, some national monuments, not all of the national monuments are administered to by the Park Service. Some of them are under the Bureau, the original BLM was the Bureau of Land Management. Um, they will negotiate mining leases, or the Forestry Service will give logging rights out on lands that might
Mhm.
be in a national monument, but not a national park. No,
Right.
no other commercial activities can take place.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's good. Thank you. And then Gail wanted to know if in the Channel Islands, is there as much snorkeling as diving? Is there snorkeling in the kelp bed area? Are you likely to see many of the 150 species of the Channel Islands? And sorry, I'm just having trouble.
No, it's
Yeah,
scuba
you can.
diving is more prevalent, I think,
Mhm.
because the tides, the currents. You got to be a pretty strong swimmer to go play around down there. And it's deeper water. The It's not a shallow beach like the Virgin Islands or something. Those you can snorkel around, and the coral reefs are shallow. The kelp beds are much deeper. Um,
Mhm.
so I would say more scuba.
Okay. Um, let's see. Is the park in Alaska considered an island park too, or no?
There are no island parks. The Glacier Bay can only be accessed from the sea, but it's connected to the land.
Mhm.
Um, there are some other parks that you could argue should be included. I got into a heated discussion with the rangers up at Voyagers up in the Boundary Waters, because 90% of their park is islands out in all the lakes and stuff. But I explained there are 3 different visitor centers, and I drove my car to each one of the 3 visitor centers. So how are you saying you're an island? If you can bring an RV there, it doesn't qualify as an island to me.
Mhm.
Biscayne National Park down just south of Miami, off the southeastern tip of Florida, 90% of that park is water. But it's the bay. It's not really an island. There are a couple of the keys. It's the northernmost of the Florida Keys, but the visitor center is on the mainland. So I don't know. I divide them up so that they're comfortable, and I can get 7 or 8 parks in whatever geographical delineation I've chosen.
Mhm. What island park has the best waterfalls?
Ooh, I would say, well, if you want waterfalls, maybe after we finish all the national park series, we'll start some foreign travel ones, because
Oh yeah.
I spent a few weeks circumnavigating the island of Iceland, which is the largest volcanic island anywhere
Yeah.
in the world. There are over 10,000 waterfalls on Iceland. I went on a waterfall tour there, and I'll show you some waterfalls to beat all waterfalls. But in the answer to your question, I would say probably Maui, Haleakala comes
Mhm.
down straight. There are big ones on the Big Island. Either of the Hawaiian parks, I guess, have the best waterfalls because of the vertical. I mean, Mauna Loa is 13,000 feet tall, and it goes all the way down to sea level. So the water's got a cascade. They're not readily accessible. You have to hike in the jungle to get to them.
Mhm. Wonderful. Yeah, we'd love to hear that. My husband visited Iceland at one point, and he also did the circuit, but
The
he
ring
couldn't,
ring
in the
road,
vehicle that he had rented, could not go overland. And
right?
apparently that's what you need. You need that vehicle that can really go off-road to see the best stuff.
Correct.
So that's
To go into
cool.
the interior.
Yeah, right. Well, we've just got so many positive comments from your presentation, and I really appreciate another great night spent, hour and a half spent with us. And thank you so much.
Well, next February the next talk will be interesting, because I'm gonna show you pictures of the Sierra Nevada parks, the Yosemite and Kings Canyon and Sequoia.
Mhm.
But just a heads up, I just put the finishing touches on the first guided, my one of my boys, one of my sons owns a CrossFit facility over in Hopkinton, and he's got all these uber athletes that want to go and challenge themselves. So they want us to put some guided tours together. And our first guided tour is this June, and we're going to the Sierra Nevadas to climb to the top of Half Dome and El Capitan by the backsides, not up the rock faces, but some really high watermark hikes in all three of the Sierra Nevada parks. So I'll tease you with the pictures and then open it up if I can only take 6 people. So if
Oh,
clients are
amazing.
interested.
Yeah, cool. That would be great. Yeah, um, I wonder if it will be, so when is the trip again? Sorry,
It's the third week in June.
oh, okay. So by that time, yeah, it might be a little bit safer to travel for everyone. I mean,
I just as an aside on that, I
mhm,
visited 13 national parks in 2020.
yeah,
The air filtration system on an airplane is vastly superior to anything you're going to get walking up and down the aisles in Home Depot or
sure.
Walmart.
Hmm.
If you're safe on the airplane, when you get to the parks, if you know where you want to go, the visitor centers, in fact, are mostly closed. That you can't go sit in the theater and watch the movie about the park and stuff. Those things are closed down, but the roads are open and the trails are open,
Hmm.
and nobody's there.
Right.
So it's actually an awesome time to be visiting parks.
Yeah, I know.
In my opinion.
We're thinking about traveling. We're thinking about planning our own for April, but well, I mean, we may just drive there, but I mean, ultimately, like if we end up at a national park or campsites along the way, seems like the best way to go nowadays
Well,
for vacations.
you'll have far fewer company than normally.
Yeah. Well, thank
All
you so
right.
much, Steve,
All right.
and I'll send the recording out to everybody who registered. And yeah, join us next time. I just shared the registration link in the chat, and that's going to be on February
11th.
11th. Yes. February 11th at 7 p.m. So thank you so much and have a great night.
All right, thank you much. Bye now.